All right, everyone, it's time to point out a lot of hypocrisy that's coming from the Washington Post. The Washington Post, I think at this point, is trying to set itself aside as the most biased, spin-worthy, pile of lard of all so-called journalistic sites. You know, the legacy media, which is the proper term. By the way, if any of you haven't cut the cable, can you please do so and stop using their websites? If you have to refer to them, like I have to, otherwise shills will say, you don't have a source. I have no choice. They'll say, oh, it's not a proper source if it's like an alt media site. So I just archive it, so they're not getting any actual views from it when they're visiting stuff. And I've got cats like trying to crawl all over me. They're all goofed up right now. I'll explain later. I'll do a garden update. It'll be pretty funny. But the Washington Post is calling the Seth Rich story fake news now. Link in the description, archived, of course, to this. Isn't the Washington Post the same site that asks for absolutely no real evidence in the Trump-Russia case? Now, I would think extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That is, the more extraordinary the claim is, the more evidence you should really want, the more tangible, less circumstantial the evidence should be to achieve the threshold of believing something. Which one of these is harder to believe? Someone got assassinated for political reasons after leaking documents as part of a cover-up, or the President of the United States is in the pocket of a bunch of fucking Russians. I think the latter requires a little bit higher a threshold of evidence. Maybe not like monumental, but I want something other than James Comey's memo. I want something other than a couple of intel heads that said, yeah, Russians tried to interfere in the election. Saying they tried to interfere doesn't mean they succeeded. Even if they succeeded, it doesn't mean Trump was consciously involved. I want more evidence of this. I want to wait until this investigation occurs to see exactly what evidence they have or they think they have. And saying, by the way, WaPo, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, regardless of the site, our sources say Trump is afraid. Our sources say Trump is moving money overseas. Our sources say Jared Kushner has undue influence. Your sources... What are the sources? I understand the concept of shielding your sources when you're a journalistic firm, but if you're not going to conduct any journalism, you just say, oh yeah, an anonymous source that claims to have an anonymous source within the White House who claims to be a friend of James Comey, who claims that he was in on this meeting, says that's a rumor. That's no different from the Weekly World News, the Inquirer, the Sun, or any other tabloid. It is gossip. That is, it is a claim that is being made without evidence. In the Seth Rich case, we have a dead body. We have extremely strange circumstances, even in the original police report. We have someone who's been shot as part of a robbery, supposedly, trying to pickpocket him, who then doesn't actually take anything from him. It makes no sense. The story, the official line of the story, doesn't make sense. It's just like Michael Hastings all over again. With the Trump-Russia stuff, we have a claim made by James Comey and claims made by anonymous sources for the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm sorry, that doesn't rise anywhere near to the threshold of the evidence needed to impeach a person. It barely achieves the threshold needed to actually investigate the situation. Meanwhile, Seth Rich is actually dead. The story actually makes no sense, and all they can say is, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. That term is retarded anyway. But if you want to talk about a conspiracy theory, what about the idea that the President of the United States has been compromised by a foreign state due to its own intel gathering or its espionage or something? I would think it takes a little bit more credibility as far as the evidence goes to believe that than to believe that somebody was killed for political reasons. Just think about it. You look throughout time. Let's look at human history. Let's try to stretch our brains out here past the bias and partisan spin. In how many cases has some extremely powerful head of state been controlled by a foreign power? Yeah, there are a few situations, but generally speaking, no. If they're less powerful, yeah, they're probably a puppet. If they're leading a nuclear state with the #1 military and supposedly the best intelligence apparatus, a little bit harder to actually make them do what you want to do, especially when the people supposedly influencing that state, the head of state, are in a rust bucket economy with a post-Soviet style of espionage and data gathering. Russia's got a lot of power. It's mostly nuclear and tank related, not related to its espionage. As far as hackers go, you should be far more worried about the Chinese than you should be about the Russians. I had a story today where a bunch of CIA assets were killed by the Chinese. No, it's not front page news. Very briefly, people spoke about it. You probably won't even hear about it again because it doesn't go with their flow of information. They want to make it it's all about Russia. It's all about Russia. Just ignore the Chinese question over there. The rising second power of the world. The one that has already basically eclipsed Russia and everything but its number of nuclear weapons. They go forth, they give us these anonymous sources and tell us, oh, just believe it, just because we're mainstream media. We've got journalistic integrity, so we can't tell you our sources. We can't tell you anything else. We can't tell you when we got the data. We can't tell you how we got the data. No, we can't tell you anything. Just believe us. Sorry, but I'm not just going to believe you. The last time we believed a couple of random intel heads and the corporate media, we got Iraq. Before that, we got Vietnam. We got all sorts of crap. And it looks a lot like the Red Scare all over again. Oh, be very, very afraid. The Russians control Trump. The Russians control... Yeah, now they're stretching it even further. Have you even noticed this? That their line now has gone past just Trump as a Russian asset. Now they call into question the legitimacy of everyone in the GOP. Oh, maybe the GOP is actually controlled because one person made an off-cuff statement about, oh, I think the Russians pay Trump or something like that. You know, back when he was seen as the chaos candidate with no chance of winning who was just trying to screw around in the GOP, back when the GOP insiders, the neocons, thought that, it made sense for them to crack a joke about him being some sort of Russian asset, just trying to throw the race into turmoil. So Hillary Clinton, who they had already cast as a far left individual, a proto-Marxist, for years and years could win the election. That was what they thought at the time. In joking, it was in jest. Now they've taken that and extrapolated that to mean the GOP knew he was a Russian asset. The GOP knew he was controlled by Putin, but they don't care because they're selling our nation out for money or something like that. And this is coming from groups like the WaPo, New York Times. No, you know what? Some alt-media site is just as capable of conducting journalism as the Washington Post. Probably more so because they're not controlled by corporations. Now, if somebody says, like Kim.com comes out and says, oh, I know about the Seth Rich stuff, announcement coming Tuesday. I would love, in all cautious honesty, I would love that to be true. I would love for the case to be cracked wide open and throw the whole political situation into uproar. Where he can prove beyond any doubt, yes, Seth Rich leaked the DNC documents, it wasn't Russia. He was assassinated for doing so, and a cover-up is in progress now. I would love nothing better than that, but I'm not going to hold my fucking breath. I'm going to assume that this is either Kim.com wants attention, or Kim.com has some sort of totally tangential evidence that doesn't really rise beyond the threshold of what we've already got. Which is to say, honestly, speculation. It's still speculation, a theory, one that makes sense, one that's believable, that Seth Rich was assassinated, that he was a DNC leaker. I happen to believe that based on the flow of information in the case, based on what I see, and based on the fact that nobody wants to fucking talk about it or conduct an actual probe, based on the fact that nobody wants to actually investigate the death, I think that that's credible. As opposed to the Russia crap that I don't consider credible. But that doesn't mean that any random piece of information that comes out about the case, with somebody claiming they have some mind-numbing evidence that proves this beyond any doubt, oh, I can say, yes, he was the DNC leaker. I'm not going to take that at face value. No, I want to see his evidence too. I'm going to wait till Tuesday, see what he has. And hopefully, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I'm being pessimistic, and he can prove that that's actually the case. That Seth Rich was the DNC leaker, and all of, you know, basically the whole political situation in the U.S. would fall apart overnight. If it turns out that that's true. WaPo, they'd be like out of a job. But they should be out of a job anyway. We should have turned off all that crap years ago. Archive their links if you have to use them, otherwise don't use them at all. Do a write-up, just copy the article to your fucking blog and share that or something. Do something like that. They shouldn't be getting any money because they're not conducting journalism. These people pick and choose what they want to investigate. The Washington Post doesn't investigate something if it's told by the DNC. Don't investigate this. Don't dig any deeper. Here's $1 million. That's what happens in politics. Are you telling me that it's so hard to believe that occasionally someone gets killed for political reasons? It happens all over the rest of the world all the time. Our own government admits it. Oh yeah, political killings, Libya and Russia and China and North Korea and everywhere else. Every other country has this happen, but it can't happen here because we're just so fucking perfect. Our political system is so wonderful. Our politicians are so honest. They would never hire a hitman here in the United States. Just ignore the McCarthy era. Just ignore the death of Martin Luther King. Just ignore every other political assassination that we know happened in our country's history. Now it's different. Now everybody's honest and above board. Bullshit. They're less honest than they've ever been before, and they're getting less honest by the day, and the corporate media is going down into the toilet with them. I don't trust the WaPo at its word on any issue. If they tell me that it's going to be a sunny day, my bet is on it's going to be raining. The same goes for the New York Times and all these other crap outlets. They don't conduct journalism. When they hide behind journalistic integrity, it means they don't actually have a source. They pull it out of their asshole, or their source is full of shit. So when Kim.com says, I have this evidence, I can prove Seth Rich was the DNC leaker, that is just as credible, possibly slightly more credible, than the WaPo saying, oh, we've got a source that says X, Y, and Z about Trump. Because at least we actually know the person who's doing the talking. At least we can actually question that person. We know who it is. WaPo, they're not going to tell you shit. New York Times, they're not going to tell you shit. Fox won't tell you shit either. Fuck Fox News. It's the same thing. Same thing, only more bra grabbing. That's the only difference between Fox and CNN and MSNBC. The only difference is there's more apparent sexual harassment going on in their newsroom. It's the only difference. The same thing. I'm not going to trust these people. Screw them. So when the WaPo calls it, fake news, fake news. Everything you put out on a political token can be said to be fake. You haven't provided evidence for any of these claims. You have a source. Wonderful. Who's the source? You know, there's an investigation right now going on involving the FBI, involving Congress, and involving everybody and their mother. Don't you think you're going to get called on to expose your sources by the government? Are you going to bow to that pressure, or are you going to still say, oh, we've got all this wonderful evidence showing that Trump is a good friend of Putin and sucks him off every day, but we're never going to reveal our sources even if the FBI subpoenas us? Is that where you're going to fall on your sword? You're going to strangulate yourself. Good riddance. I hope you stop existing altogether, but it doesn't help your credibility. Hell, Trump can have as low of popularity as he wants. People are still going to trust him more than they trust any of these media firms, which they should. You know, any randomly chosen individual outside of the corporate media is more likely to be telling the truth about... I would sooner believe somebody say they saw a unicorn than believe the WaPo or the New York Times or any of these other groups. Totally compromised. They're controlled by banks and corporations. They've got a political axe to grind. They don't conduct journalism anymore. They've got a horse in the race as far as whether we do or do not exist under globalism. They're going to headhunt after anyone that challenges it, and they're going to leave, and even the largest scandal they're never even going to fucking report on unless it's to call it fake news if it involves people that are on their so-called side. It's just the way that DC operates now. It's dumb, it's corrupt, it shouldn't be happening, they should know better, but that's just sort of the way that it is. That's about all. Peace out.